Welcome, everyone, to Turning Organization Complexity into Training Consistency. I'm Corey Strawbridge. I work with Skooks, and I'm going to walk you through org structure and how we handle that at Skooks and how we handle that complexity with ease. As I go through, I'm going to walk through some of the explanation of this, and then we'll move over and take a quick look at what it looks like in the Skooks platform itself. So, without further ado, let's take a look at what we're going to go through today. So what we're going to start with is why do we not call it hierarchy? It's called org for a reason. We'll start there and then jump into how the Skooks org actually works. From there, we'll move into our simple versus multi-layer org because different organizations need to support different structures. Then we'll move into actually building one. We'll walk through piece by piece just the steps of what that looks like and explain how it's structured and why actually putting different hierarchies together to construct an org structure. And then we'll move into that franchise decentralized model of supporting brands and different structures altogether. And then something that's not often considered, the DNA of a learner. We talk about org structure, but learners actually have their own DNA, and it's very important in Skook, so it's great to bring those together. So let's jump straight in and talk about why not hierarchy. So we have to think bigger than hierarchy as we look at this. If you look at how hierarchy is defined, arrangement of items, names, values, objects that are above, below, and same level as another. So that adjacent mindset of everything is under one single hierarchy doesn't really work. It actually limits you. So we wanted to think about it as tackling these more complex orgs. What if I have a series of hierarchies that work together to really build out my organization? And then I can tap into any piece of those today. So as we look at it, organization is right at the top, and it filters right down to different hierarchies that all together form that structure. So when you don't want to think in hierarchy, we'll show the construction and then really the building blocks around that. So let's actually look at what is an organizational structure to Skooks. In Skooks, organizational structure consists of components, but is not limited to locations, teams, attributes, geographic elements, companies, and a slew of other items that you may need in your org that you might not have today. And we arrange those into one or more hierarchies that supporting business because it's always changing. What is here right now might not be there tonight, might not be there tomorrow, or things might change in structure and how they're flowing. So let's keep moving here and go into how we define it out. So breaking down org structure itself, a unit. So as we think about org structure, the bottom level of this is called a unit. And we labeled this for a reason because it's very ambiguous in the sense that this is where most users will end up. And most frontline employees, most individuals will live at that unit level. It is the smallest component and is often used as the building block that we structure the entire foundation upon. Above unit is anything that is technically above that unit. As you see here, districts, regions, brands, franchisees, it's any meaningful business component that if you want to group together units in a set way, this is how we do it. And you can, within Skooks, have an unlimited number, and unlimited is true, unlimited number of orgs that those connections can all flow straight up so that we have a district in a region and a region in a division and so forth. And I'll show that here in a moment. But keep the unit and above unit mindset, and I'm going to show how those actually work. So with that in mind, let's also talk about simple org versus multi-layer org. That is really something we need to focus on. So a simple org is that unit is the lowest structure. And we can think about this like a restaurant. A restaurant location is where an individual may work, and everything is differentiated at that location by the job they do. So if you think about a department, it would be a unit. A restaurant location, maybe even a retail location in a mall. There's the location, and what you're doing is that's gonna help you delineate what the individuals will do within that part of the business. A multi-layer organization is where we stack that up, something like a hotel, a movie theater, a plant, an office building. If you think about anything, a hotel has departments. That's how they support it. And the jobs then filter into those departments. plants or some type of manufacturing, different parts of the business support different activities that go on. Office buildings have departments truly within a movie theater, box office, concessions, theater operations. These are different areas that we may need to support. So we shift this and we want to make sure that we've captured that multi-layer structure so that when we connect the department, it is actually where the job physically connects to the location. And I'm going to actually show this right now, how this works with some fun little graphics. So here is a unit and a couple of different options. Restaurant location, how cute. Keep coming, and we have an office building. So this could be, depending on the structure, could be a unit, and everything is delineated by the job. Another one we might see is a manufacturing plant, as I mentioned, and we have customers today that that have each of these. So they have said a plant is a location, and the job delineates this. One that a lot of people don't think about is actually a team, a pod, or a cohort. So as you see construction, you're out in the field, you're moving from job site to job site. You're truly that mobile learner, mobile team that's out there. That team needs to have their compliance training in order to go on a job site. They need to be able to have the proper training, but we want to be able to have that continuity. So if they move around, we're able to have people move in and out of those teams or cohorts, just depending on how it's structured. All of these can be units, and that's a nice way to think about it, but let's actually see what it means when we think about a unit. So we'll bring back our little restaurant here, and our restaurant is going to have a setup of jobs. And we've all been in a restaurant. You go in, there's a host that you're greeted by. When you sit down, you're greeted by the server. There's a problem, or someone might be assisting running food. There might be a manager sitting at a bar, bartender, so forth. So we want to say, this is what I do in this location, and this is all structured based on my job. So the above unit exists. Anything above this, any type of way that this location could connect up, this is a simple org. Everything is delineated by the job. Now, if we switch this around and move this over, we might have a hotel. As I mentioned, hotel lives at the above unit level. The reason is that we want to use the units for their department. So we put that line back in, we bring in the unit, and now we bring in the different departments that we all have seen at a hotel: front desk, housekeeping, engineering, restaurant. That's a great way to be able to have managers running those teams and be able to create a structure. This in and of itself is a hierarchy right here, but it's only one aspect of a hotel. Now, at those specific locations or parts of the business, the unit, might have agents or engineers. The job doesn't necessarily delineate what you do. And an example is, I might have a restaurant in a hotel. I might also have a banquet department. Both of those have a server. Banquet server and a restaurant server do two totally different things. And what they're focused on, their training, is going to really say, okay, you're a server in this part of the business. This is what you do. If you're a server in this part of the business, this is what you do. So we've got to keep those broken out. That's why this structure comes in, and we get that multi-layer organization. So these are the two ways we really should think about how org works, and it gives you so much capability and ability to adjust what you're doing on the fly. So let's grab our little restaurant back here, and it comes back, but maybe we run 6 restaurants. We have 6, same concept, everything is exactly the same, and we might want to bring in some attributes about these. So as I mentioned, we can think about how a restaurant can be classified, identified, broken down based on could sell alcohol. They could have a drive-through. They could have equipment, freestanding location. These are just some examples that you might have. But what we do with this is we have that ability to say, I need every location that has drive-through. Now we have 4 that light up, but I also need to make sure they're a freestanding location because of specific parameters of this. Now only 2 light up. This is just an example of how we want to think about how org works and how that structure flows, because attributes is just one piece of the DNA of that location. So let's move forward here. And now we can say, let's group this together. We want to start thinking about this geographically. So this is going to fit into an area. That area will encompass these 6 locations. And as we break those down, we may have other locations that fit in all the same concept, and I'm bringing up the concept for a reason because we're going to talk about different concepts and different brands. But I have 24 locations across 4 different areas. So what we put above that, an area reports up to a region for us, as an example. So now we're creating a hierarchy. We have an area type of above unit and a region type of above unit. Those exist here. Our units still exist the exact same. So everything we've talked about stays consistent. It's just thinking about where things need to be. In ours, we're building a simple org structure to support the business and what we do. And then we're going to be able to set up all the different ways we can really break this down. So let's take a sneak ahead on the DNA of a unit, or in this case, a restaurant. It's a lot of ways you can think about this. So I'm going to pull out some of these real quick. And the first one is organizational. Thinking about a restaurant support center, franchisees. I might have different franchise groups running, sharing a location. It might have 5 owners, and we want to be able to have that. But then some of those owners share in others. We can break that all apart. And that is one of the beauties of setting up an org structure. Brands. We work with some organizations, 10, 15, 20 brands, and they need to be able to support that. So this is part of the DNA so that I can get that in there. Each of these could be a hierarchy in and of itself. Then we come over to the right side here. We did go through part of this, but as you look at it, we've got a setup of city, area, district, state, region, and division. This is a geographic structure. This is truly a hierarchy. State and city, a location is going to stay as in and as that piece. And then we could add in different components. Of course, orgs change. Maybe our divisions, we rerun the lines, or the regions switch around areas, we redraw the area map. That's great, but this is still all part of the geographic hierarchy, and we want to make sure we have that in there. The last piece is going to be what we talked about earlier. For example, attributes, freestanding, drive-through, equipment. We support different equipment at different locations. If you have this fryer, if you have this stove, if you have this heat press, if you have whatever it might be, we want to be able to be targeted with what that location supports. So now as you're looking at this web of what can be connected, I can get in and select different pieces to say, I need this franchise that's part of this brand, and I need it in this region. And you can mix and match any of these, and that's why the DNA is so important. If you don't have that, you're going to struggle to be able to support assignments, reporting capabilities, communication. These are things that if you don't have clear lines down or clear capabilities to combine some of these, you're going to then have to blanket it. And we've run into organizations that have had to deal with that. And this is something we've solved for them. They couldn't delineate who needed specific training, so they just blanketed it out there and said, hey, if you're not in these, just ignore this. That's not a way to do your day-to-day operations. So let's be targeted on this. Now, I said I wanted to talk about that franchise and brands mindset. There are 2 components here that we need to consider as we look through this. Franchise and brands run similarly, but function differently based on your organization. So I might be franchisee 1 with 1 store, and I'm able to see that. Great. Franchise 2 has 3 stores, 3 different concepts in that same setup. Now, the beauty of this is those could each have their own branding and needs. They might each need to have their own training catalog. So I don't need to see the branding of concept 1, but I do need to be able to see my branding, my concept, and all the training that goes along with it. Franchise 3 has a mix and match, 6 locations, 4 different brands, but we see this all the time. This is a very common use case. And the beauty of this is that each of these can have their own branding, training catalogs, and resource library if you choose to turn this on. And the reason I say if you choose to turn this on is we have some organizations that say you can't utilize branding. Everybody sees the same brand. You're going to see your concept's brand, but you can create your own training and resource library. And those dotted lines are actually siloed. So some of our organizations have 2,000 franchisees. That's 2,000 businesses in one organization, in one academy, that they need to be able to have that delineation, still have corporate oversight as needed, and then be able to support all the other org parameters we were looking at on that previous slide. Absolutely something we do and we thrive at. On the brand side, a little bit easier. We might have 4 brands, and those 4 brands each have their own structure. They can be siloed. They can each have their branding. So I come in and I might have a coffee shop, whereas we might have a hamburger QSR. In this instance, we think about this. This is where we can go across, not just even in the same industry. Maybe we have QSRs, we have retail, and we have manufacturing under one roof. We can support that structure. And we want to be able to provide the exact training they need to when they need to and be able to really slice and dice it. So franchise brands, similar structure in how they need to be delineated, visibility. Franchise 3, for example, might need to see one of franchise 2's locations, but not franchise 1. So now we can have that crossover as needed, but not muddy the waters and they'd see everything. So this is a great way to think about franchise and brands and decentralizing those structures as needed. So org structure, you see how many hierarchies we could have here. We can have a number under one roof. The last piece I want to touch on for an individual is actually the DNA of a learner. It's not something that's considered often. We often think top down. How do we go all the way down to our locations, our departments? But what about the actual individual that's in that department or in that location? They have their own DNA. So we have a learner, we might have a location on here, and that learner might be in location 1, which is a specific brand, and they could be a shift supervisor and a server. Now they need to understand and get training that pertains to being a shift supervisor and a server with that brand, which might be unique. They may also be in a second brand. They could be a bartender here, and that training is completely separate. And if it doesn't cross over, my manager at location 1 shouldn't see what I'm doing at location 2 because it doesn't pertain to them unless it's a general training, compliance, alcohol certification, something that is not unique. That's something that needs to go across all. So now I can set that up that I get all of those pieces broken down by location. I get the exact training I need. There's an update to the drink menu at location 2. Location 1 should have no idea that that's happening. The learner, however, I am responsible for that because I'm a bartender there. So being able to support cross-trained, cross-location, multiple jobs, very straightforward and something that we do very well. Another piece you might consider, can't share a birth date, but we do have some of our organizations that need to know if someone's over 16, 18, 21. And the reason this is important is because they need that ability to come in and grab. Everyone that's over 18 can serve alcohol, or can 21, we might need somebody that's over 21 to be able to open and close a location. That is a real use case that we've run into. So being able to have these as parameters in here is going to be insanely important to being able to, again, train accordingly and make sure we're tracking the right information. And that should be updated all the time. This isn't something that I put it in and then we update once every month, once a quarter. This should be updated every day, make the check and say, oh, they're over 18 today. We need to make sure they get their appropriate training. Days employed, another big one. This is something that organizations need. They need to know how long someone's employed. So at day 30, you're going to get a training. At day 60, you'll get another training. Day 90, you're going to get a survey with how your onboarding went, and different things might come in, might be adjusted. So you really need to be able to support that on needs. And we have different organizations that will track all the way up to different number of years so they can actually celebrate anniversaries and utilize this for anniversary components. And one of the last pieces, hourly and salary. As we think about it, an hourly versus a salaried employee. Salaried might be able to access training anywhere. They might be given a mobile device so we say take training when you can and make sure you get it done. Whereas an hourly worker, we need you on site. So you need to be on our Wi-Fi. You need to be on our IP address. You need to be able to take training. You can't use your own data plan. So we're not paying for that. So we can lock all of this down. And so now stack this on top of what we do with the org structure. insanely powerful to be able to now set up assignments that are targeted, get reporting on these pieces, and having this constantly updated is going to make life so much easier. So for as far as our presentation on just walking through, I've got that set here. We're going to move actually into the platform itself and walk through that. So I'm going to switch my screen over. And as I move over to this new screen, I'm going to pull this in. This is actually just one of our demo environments. And what we've got here is we've got a setup of what individuals or what org structure components exist here and then individuals will fall in where they need to. So I'm going to keep this just a little bit shorter just because there's not a ton to see here because a lot of this is handled in the data, in the flow as we set it up. It's all dependent on what we have access to, but you see things along here. These are above units and units. So above units, we have business units, city, districts, groups, leadership cohorts. We've seen this a lot. We're putting leadership cohorts through. So then people will come in from all over the nation, all over the world, take training together as a larger group and then go back to their job. But with that cohort, we can track them. And that's something that can be automatically fed or people can be automatically added, removed if they don't meet the criteria. So we've seen that done. Region, state, support center might have its own flow of, I need to see all of these locations and all of these structures. This is the above unit structure. I'll look at, so those are different types of above units. Now we look at it, we've got cities, we might have districts, we might have a new hire group that we want to support. So when someone comes in, if they're day 1 to 30, we consider them a new hire. They're automatically added to that group. They get specific training, specific components based on where they're at in the business. Day 31 hits, now they're pulled out of that group automatically. That's not something that's tracked in HR. That's not something that's tracked in any HCM. That is tracked. We're able to set that up within Skooks and control it here. So we can build out however we want to that org. And this is what we work with organizations on. Get away from that hierarchy mindset and think about stacking those hierarchies so you have so much more capability. Now, the last piece I want to touch on, and then we'll go over to questions here in a moment, is what units, what is available within the unit side of things. So units will have their own setup, their own location. We can put in IP addresses or a series in here. We're able to put in a physical address for geofencing. So we've got that capability, but if you look, we've connected a lot of these across. They could be connected to a city. They could be connected to a state. You could go down even to the county level in case there is an alcohol or some kind of certification that needs to be attained based on an individual. So we're handling that. And as you move around, I might move from Chicago to Florida and I'm down in Tampa now or vice versa. And then when I go, we can actually make a check to see if you meet the requirements. And maybe your food certification or your alcohol certification goes from 3 years to 4 years or reverse. Well, if it's reverse, you need to take training immediately. So we can handle this as the org goes. We have a lot of capability to be able to track this. And this is why those hierarchies work very seamlessly together to be able to support your business needs as you move through it. So like I said, not a ton to see here, but I wanted to make sure I was showing what can be done and go through that. So at this point, I'd like to move over and see if there's any questions, and I'll see if I can answer a few of those. It looks like there are a couple questions that we have, and I'll answer these live. We have a question of, can you have a manager structure with individuals who report outside of the direct hierarchy? Answer is yes. So this is something we do quite frequently. There's a lot of times the manager supervisor structure does not match what is in your org structure or all of the hierarchies. So we actually set up 2 structures side by side so that you could run something like performance reviews or coaching or skill assessments so that I have my true manager that I report to while I have this org that says this is the part of the business you're in. So the short answer is yes, you absolutely can. A lot of times we will set those up and have them flow across. So then you're part of your manager and you're also part of the business where you're at. So that DNA of a user, you'd have another one that comes off that says manager or supervisor, and then you're part of their team. So now that reporting is there. Another question is, how do you select and use more than one hierarchy at a time? So that's a great question. Each of those hierarchies is set up where we have a geographic. We might have our support center as an above unit. They're all going to be set up and flowing, and you're going to be able to see those in action. So we can do it a couple of ways. You can simply select the jobs you want and be able to connect and select the specific units, above units as needed. Or you can use Boolean logic. And we have those built in to say, I want 1 and 2. I may want Miami and Springfield, but not anybody that's in the state of Texas, and be able to say a specific job. We get very creative with how we're setting this up. So then, as I mentioned, you're starting to get in and get that training pushed directly out to who you need. No more blanket training is needed, and it really does help. So uh, I guess the short answer is we do it 2 ways. You can select multiple pieces very easily, or you can do Boolean logic. So both can be supported. Both are available to you. Those are the questions I see right now. So at this point, I want to thank you for joining and appreciate you attending. Hopefully this was insightful and you gained some knowledge. And hopefully there's questions that come after. Thank you.